Hi there, I'm the MythKeeper. Welcome back to my channel. This week we're doing things a little bit differently. I'm hijacking the channel because, believe it or not, today is my 1-year anniversary. I've been on YouTube for exactly 1 year, or maybe it's Friday and I'm dropping this on a Wednesday, but very soon it'll be my 1-year anniversary. I'm really excited about it. I can't believe how far this channel has come. You know, I planned originally to just make one video and it's just exploded from there. 10,000 subscribers, so cool. Thank you for all the support, everyone that's watching. So what we're doing today is my girlfriend, my partner behind the camera, is going to be asking me some questions. It's going to be interview format. I'll try to answer the questions as best I can so you all can know a little bit more about the MythKeeper. All right, let's get into it. What was my first role-playing game experience? Well, that's a complicated question. So some of you may know from various comments that I've put in the comments below that although I live in the US now, I didn't grow up here. I'm actually British and Italian, both. I grew up in Europe. When I was growing up, honestly, Dungeons & Dragons wasn't as popular over there as it was over here. So I think that's changing a little bit. But when I grew up, my first exposure to this kind of sort of fantasy game was actually Warhammer. So when I was probably elementary school, middle school, my brother and I shared a room. We used to take the room. I remember we got I think our first edition was the 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle box set that included orcs and goblins, and it included high elves. And we used to take the floor of the room and turn it into a big battlefield. We had his armies on one side, my armies on the other, and they'd clash. And so my first exposure to an actual role-playing game, funnily enough, was one that we kind of invented. So the story behind that is one summer we were visiting family in Italy, and we wanted to bring our Warhammer armies with us, but we couldn't because Warhammer is uniquely unportable as a game. And we just had this idea that we could bring just a couple of minis with us, and we could take turns going through an adventure, and we would pick like a mini that would be like our character, and we would mostly use kind of theater of the mind. And so we sort of experimented with this. We called it Fantasy Quest because it was Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And after playing a few games, we were like, we're onto something here. This is a good game. And we proceeded to tell our cousin about it, and we're like, we came up with this great concept. See, one player kind of controls the adventure, and the other player sort of plays through it. And he said, that game already exists. It's called Dungeons & Dragons. It's been around since the 70s. He showed us all the books, and we were like, we thought we invented it. So that was my first exposure to a role-playing game. And I think what I learned from that is that you know, the central idea of role-playing is actually a really obvious concept. It's basically cowboys and Indians with dice, right? It's fantasy and make-believe, but with some rigor and some rules around it. And I know Gary Gygax gets a lot of credit for D&D, but I have to imagine that other people were having similar ideas in different parts of the world around that time. So yeah, I think role-playing is awesome, and I love the diversity of role-playing games out there. I do think that was my appeal. That was the appeal for me, rather, as I got into role-playing. I'm a storyteller by nature. It's why I tend to be a GM more than I tend to be a player. I love to tell stories, and I think getting my arms around the myth and lore and history of the games that I played in, that was always the most fun part. And in fact, I enjoy picking up lore so much that although this channel is devoted purely to Pathfinder, I've played a ton of different types of role-playing games. I got really into World of Darkness for a while. I got really into Dark Sun for a while. So I've played a bunch of different role-playing games in a bunch of different settings and genres, and it's always the lore and history that really attracts me. But the cool thing about role-playing is people come to it for all kinds of different reasons. Something that I think about a lot is Mark Rosewater, who's the chief creative director at Magic the Gathering, which is kind of Wizards of the Coast, really big product, much bigger than D&D actually. He has these psychographic profiles for people that play Magic. So I'm a Vorthos in the Magic psychographic profiles, which means I love lore and history. But there are players that are like Johnnies, which love combinations of things, and there are players like Spikes that like really optimized things, and there are players called Timmies that like really big dragons and monsters. And I think that there's probably, it's less well investigated, but there's probably something similar for D&D and role-playing, which is there's a bunch of different psychographic profiles that go into gamers. And I like to have a mix of people at my table. I like to have people that are super into getting into character. I like some number crunchy people. All types of players are welcome at my game table. I think that's a really cool article that you read. In fact, I'm going to dig it up. I'm going to put it in the comments below so people can have a look at that. But I think, and I must confess, as I answer this question, I haven't read the article myself, but I think structured socialization as a concept makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's probably the reason why we do icebreakers in professional settings, right? Anything that you can do to structure a conversation will sort of necessarily break down some of the natural unease that people have when getting to know each other, because they don't have to think about what to talk about. And I think role-playing does an additional thing as well that like a board game wouldn't do, right? I think you can put like kids in front of Settlers of Catan and they'll suddenly start talking about sheep and wood and whatnot, and they'll get to know each other even without having to like ask the deep questions. But what role-playing does that's really special is you play a persona. So you get to sort of be a slightly different version of yourself. If you're a GM, you get to be like 100 different people. That's really fun. But you get to be a slightly different version of yourself, and that might allow you to express yourself in ways that you necessarily wouldn't in the real world, and show more sides of yourself. And I think that can be, that's a really cool way of getting to know someone. And I think that's part of the reason for role-playing games' popularity, for sure, yeah. What inspired the creation of the channel? It was my Curse of the Crimson Throne game. I'd had some players leave, and I was bringing on a bunch of new players, and some of them were new to role-playing in general. I think I actually say this in the sort of preface to that video. And I wanted something that was like, here, watch this. Because you know, sometimes you assign reading to players to get them up to speed, and that's a lot of work. But a video, especially with images, it helps with learning sometimes. So I thought I wanted to make a video that provided a brief history of Pathfinder that is the kind of video that I would assign to my players if they were brand new to a game. And so that was the very first video that I made. And after I made that one, I was like, I want to do another one that's just about Varissia and Korvosa, because that's where my game is set. And that became like a snowball. You know, I started talking about, I think, ancestries. I started doing more regional deep dives, and I realized that I was just scratching the surface of Pathfinder. And probably, you know, 2 or 3 months in, I was planning to do a bunch of different settings, right? Once I realized, okay, I can make these videos. People seem to be watching them. I was like, I'll do Warhammer, and I'll do Warcraft, and I'll do, I don't know. And that might still be in the cards in the future. You know, you never know. But what I discovered is that there's a big Pathfinder, a big underserved Pathfinder audience out there, and they have a ton of lore in their world, and there's so much to talk about. So I plan to be sticking with Pathfinder content, I think, for a good long while here, at least until I get through all the major regions, of which there are still very, very many to cover. So yeah, that's how I ended up making YouTube content. All right, so that's my interview. Happy 1-year anniversary to all of you that have been following. I can't say how happy I am, not just for all the new visitors that I'm getting, but also for all the people that were there from video number 1. I always recognize your names in the comments. I get so excited, and I want to say a special thank you to all the folks that joined my Mythwatchers Club membership, which I started a few months ago. Essentially, if you join that, it's $5 a month. It's through the YouTube thing. I know some people have asked me to do a Patreon that's eventually, maybe that's a year 2 plan. I don't know, we'll get there. But for now, that's what I have. If you want to support the channel, you can join there, and you get early access to videos. Please go and check out my regular content if for whatever reason you've only seen this, because it's very different. It's just lore. It's a lot of fun. If you like it, please be sure to like and subscribe. In any case, I'll see you with more regular content next week.